When you think of Winston Churchill, this is probably the image that pops into your head, right? Defiant, stubborn, the bulldog of 1940, standing pretty much alone against the Nazi war machine. He became the face of resistance. But here's the question. Was that moment just a fluke of history, or was it the grand finale of a life's worth of preparation? To figure that out, we got to look past the myth and get to know the man.
Churchill himself? He was pretty sure it was destiny. The very night he became prime minister, as Hitler's armies were literally tearing through Western Europe, he had this profound feeling that his entire life had been leading up to this single make-or-break moment, and he was absolutely convinced he wasn't going to fail. So what was this preparation he talked about? That's really the heart of what we're digging into here. To understand the leader he was in 1940, we have to rewind the clock and see how the man himself was made, forged in adversity, driven by ambition, and sharpened by his own intellect.
And our story doesn't start on some grand battlefield. Nope. It begins in a childhood that, on the surface, was incredibly privileged, but in reality was almost completely lacking in love and affection.
Okay, so picture this. His father, Lord Randolph, was this brilliant but kinda unpredictable political star. And his mother, Jenny, was a famous society beauty. Their lives were just a constant whirlwind of politics, high society parties, and, well, love affairs. It left very little room for their son, who often felt like an afterthought. I mean, get this. Jenny's diary once showed she saw her sons just 13 times in 7 months, but she logged dozens and dozens of lunches, parties, and painting sessions.
The emotional gap here is just staggering when you see it in numbers. Between 1885 and 1892, a young Winston wrote this many letters home to his parents, a lot of them just begging for them to visit him at school.
And in that exact same 7-year stretch, this is how many letters he got back. Just 6. And when they did write, the letters were often just packed with criticism and disappointment.
So here's the thing. He wasn't just a neglected kid. He was a rebellious one. He was constantly breaking the rules, talking back. But underneath all that disgraceful behavior his teacher saw, there was this brilliant mind just waiting to be unleashed. Even as they were punishing him, his tutors couldn't help but notice his very good abilities.
Now, his father died young, at just 45, and this totally haunted Churchill. He became convinced he would die young too, and that fear, it lit an absolute fire under him. He felt this intense pressure to go out and make a name for himself, and fast. I mean, just look at the sheer speed of his early 20s. This timeline is wild. In just 4 years, he saw combat on 3 different continents, started a career as a war reporter, and even ran for parliament. This was a man in a serious, desperate hurry.
And this quote pretty much says it all, doesn't it? He actively went looking for danger because he believed that showing courage under fire was the fastest way to get famous, which was his ticket into a political career. To him, war was basically a stage for getting ahead.
And this wasn't some kind of game either. Take the Battle of Omdurman. He was part of what turned out to be the last real cavalry charge in British history. His troop, about 300 guys, charged what they thought was a small enemy force. Turns out, they'd ridden straight into a hidden ravine filled with thousands of warriors. For 2 minutes of just bloody hand-to-hand chaos, he was fighting for his life. But Churchill's preparation wasn't just about being brave. He knew he needed an intellectual arsenal to go with it, especially since he'd done so poorly in school. So you know what? He just decided to build one himself.
Stuck in the heat and boredom of his post in Bangalore, he launched his ferocious self-education plan. He called it his university. He would just devour thousands of pages from the heavyweights, historians like Edward Gibbon and Thomas Macaulay, and he soaked up their grand, sweeping ideas about history and their powerful rhythmic way of writing.
And he wasn't just reading, he was studying the art of language. He was learning the mechanics of great speeches, mastering rhetorical tools like antithesis. And this is so important. His legendary speaking ability wasn't just some raw natural talent. It was a craft that he worked on, deliberately and meticulously.
And right here, you can see that tool in action. Just listen to the rhythm in this takedown of a rival government. It's absolutely devastating. He's turning their inaction into this, symphony of failure. This is language being forged into a weapon.
All right, the final piece of his preparation was maybe the toughest one of all, living under the huge, tragic shadow of his father, Lord Randolph.
Lord Randolph was a political meteor. He had this brilliant soaring rise, followed by a catastrophic flameout. He tried to strong-arm the prime minister by threatening to resign, and he was totally shocked when they just accepted it. He never held a major office again. For Winston, the lesson was brutal and clear. Never, ever make a threat you aren't prepared to see through to the end.
Churchill basically worshipped his father, but that feeling was rarely mutual. After he finally passed the really difficult entrance exam for the military academy, on his third try by the way, this was the congratulations he got. Just a flood of criticism. He spent so much of his life chasing an approval that he just never received.
And what's so fascinating is how his public life actually kicked off. It wasn't some stuffy parliamentary debate. It was by leading a protest. Some moral crusader put up partitions in a theater bar to keep men away from prostitutes. Churchill saw this as an attack on personal liberty, so he hopped up on the wrecked barricade and gave his very first public speech, starting with the line, "Ladies of the Empire, I stand for liberty."
And this is where it all comes full circle, back to 1940. Just think about it for a second. The resilience he had to learn as a lonely kid fending for himself, the physical courage he tested again and again on the battlefield, the intellectual firepower he built book by book in his own personal university, and of course, the hard political lessons he learned from his own father's spectacular collapse.
The bottom line is this: when Churchill said his past life was but a preparation, he wasn't being dramatic. He was right. The man who met that moment in 1940 wasn't some accident of history. He was forged by it, by every single victory, every failure, every bullet dodged, and every book he ever read.
Which kind of leaves us with one final thought. Churchill's life really shows how things like adversity and ambition can come together to forge greatness. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What are the seemingly random experiences in our own lives, the struggles, the things we study, the failures, that are, right now, preparing us for a moment, a trial that we can't even see yet?